So, welcome to Theme 5. This is the episode that is all about the brain. We're going to briefly look at causes of brain dysfunction, then have a think about screening tools that are used, then have a think about why psychology is in this space at all. Just one episode to this theme, so we'll try to cram in a lot into a small space, kind of like the brain itself, I suppose. Now, we only have one episode for this theme. That's not because I don't like this stuff. Actually, I have the other problem. I find this stuff really seductive. It can really pull you in, like rocket science. It's complicated, it's challenging, it's the ultimate Sudoku puzzle. I don't know, it's like brain surgery, proper science. But we need to be really careful of this stuff. You can easily get burned. By the end of this podcast, I'll give you a sense as to why you can get burned. Now, some psychologists argue that all psychological testing is actually neuropsychological testing. So intelligence, memory, personality, and aptitude are all functions of the brain. Well, that's kind of true, The brain is where it all happens, but it's kind of like studying the architecture of Parliament House in Canberra to understand the Australian political system. It will add to the picture. It'll give you some sort of insight, but it won't give you the full picture. It won't help you understand why, for example, we've got the Prime Minister that we've got and why our Prime Ministers in Australia keep changing all the time. Now, other psychologists say that the brain research is where we specifically seek to understand the effects of brain damage, and that this work then helps us to understand how the brain works. And here you can read up about the findings of that research. It's looked at patients who have acquired brain injuries. Now, among the most common injuries that have been looked at are developmental, which are injuries that result in what is described as someone's abnormality in the development of children. Then we have brain injury through aging. This is the public often thinks of in terms of dementia. And we have brain injury caused by stroke. There's brain injury caused by what's called acquired brain injuries. Someone getting a bang on the head, or even something that penetrates through the head, through into the brain. We've got some of our most spectacular examples of brain injury, and I'll show you one of those in a moment. We also have brain damage caused by cut-off of oxygen to the brain, known as anoxia. And then we have brain damage through substance abuse. You know that thing about losing brain cells every time you have a beer? But here we're talking about people drinking a lot of beer and taking a lot of drugs. And we have neoplasms. This is the posh word for brain tumours, where you have an abnormal growth on a part of the brain. And we have brain disease and injury through the impact of neurotoxins. Now, that's a long list, and I had to do way too much Googling there to find out the medical definition. So let's move on, Now, here is one of those gruesome examples, as promised, of brain damage. This is Phineas Gage, not Phineas Fogg, the character in Jules Verne's novel Around the World in 80 Days. No, this is a Phineas who suffered quite a misfortune. He was a labourer who worked on railroad construction in America in the 1800s. And he suffered and survived a horrific accident where a large iron rod ended up going right through his head. There's an explosion that caused a large metal stake to go through his cheek and out through the back of his skull. The fact that he survived led him to become seen as a medical curiosity, a kind of medical mystery, really. This is a long time ago. Records are quite sketchy, but it was noted how Phineas's personality changed after the accident, in particular how he appeared to be less socially inhibited. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail here, but There are lots of examples like this that have caught the public's imagination, the kind of grotesque, spectacular examples. But these examples also attracted the attention and sparked the imagination of the medical science, and in turn sparked the attention and interest of psychology. And we're seeking in psychology and in medical science to better understand how the brain works and the impact of these kind of brain injuries. Sorry, part of my brain can't be working very well today. Now, we've got more recent examples of brain injury where the records are more reliable. And one famous example is of the brain injury caused to sports people, particularly those in high contact sports like NFL in the US. Now, Dave Dussin is a prominent case. The Will Smith movie Concussion was based on him. And Dave got brain trauma from repeated concussion he suffered whilst playing professional football in the US. This is why we have players taken off the rugby field in Australia as soon as they have a hit on the head.
Oh, there's the head clash. Two of their players nearly knocked themselves out.
They're taken off for a head injury assessment, an HIA. This is a practice that's based on evidence that's accumulated on the topic, which I won't go into here, but there's a reference to it on this slide. There's been a lot of research about how brain imagery, what am I talking about? Brain injury results from repeated concussion. What we have found from these examples and others like it is that there are particular areas of the brain that, if damaged, give rise to specific problems. Now, here's another list. I'm not going to go through this. Just want to point out how theories of how the brain works have been particularly informed by observing these patients with brain injuries. Now, this is a topic that's really fascinating in so many ways. At the heart of it is this idea that actually we might not be who we think we are. We believe that we are the people we are because of the experiences we have had in our lives. But this brain research kind of throws something else into the mix, something a bit different. It opens up the possibility or the interpretation that actually our personalities, the people who we think we are just an illusion, that actually we are just the outputs of brain structure and brain processes, and those things can be very easily interfered with. That we're just a hit on the head and we can become a completely different person. Now, when we're getting into that area of thinking is, those optical illusions, and those illusions where we see how our brains trick us into seeing something that's not really there, or our brains trick us so we can't actually see what's there. I'll just show you a quick video which contains a few of these illusions. Some people love these illusions, I love them, but don't tell anyone. I used this video at CQU's Open Day up in Townsville because I felt that it was probably one of the most interesting things that psychology has had to offer in terms of grabbing the public's attention. And it does grab our attention, for a number of reasons. Now, our textbook, getting back to the textbook, it starts chapter 10 with a pretty compelling argument about how widespread brain damage is in the population, and that this is why psychology must attend to the problem. And here on this slide is an example, part of an argument made about dementia and why psychology needs to work in this area. So it's been said that in Australia, 342,800 people are living with dementia, and that this will increase by 2050 to around 900,000. And it's often an argument that's made in relation to the cost to society of such impairments. Often these arguments are made as part of a bid for extra funding for an area. They're made to convince the government that investing money into a particular area will actually save the government money in the long run. Now, we also see the argument being made in psychology that we're needed. It's a kind of all hands to the pump sort of argument. You know, that there's a crisis, so everyone has to jump in to help. So here psychology needs to work in the area of brain research because of the size of the problem and there being too few professionals in the field able to fix the problem. This sets up a rationale for psychology to intervene in this area. There's an alternative argument, which is that actually psychology is overreaching here, that actually this field of brain research is the stuff of neuroscience, not of psychology, that if you have brain injury, you should go to a neurologist, not to a neuropsychologist. The argument is that we should leave this work to the specialists. Now, there's some credibility to this argument in general, but specifically in regards to brain research. Brain research is the most complicated thing you could ever do in science. You get told this in the prescribed text on the second page of chapter 10, but the implications are kind of left somewhat hanging and underexplored. But brain research is extraordinarily complex, and we really don't know what we're doing. We only just we had a look at this in a previous recorded lecture, I know, but we know so little. So maybe psychology is going to know even less than that, given it's not a specialism, like we're not a field that's wholly focused on brain research. So maybe we should just leave this to the guys who are wholly focused on this. Now, let's move on, shall we? Chapter 10 mostly describes some of the structures and systems of the brain, and it then goes on in the second part of the chapter to look at some neurological tests that are used to detect or assess brain dysfunction. Now, you don't need to know how the brain works for our essay or our exam, but you do need to know the material in the chapter for the online quiz. Now, whether you need to know this material to practice psychology is open for debate. There's no clear answer. The opinion's divided. We're not asking you to look at brain structures when we know it's pointless for you to do so. We're asking you to do it because some people think it's important, but not everyone thinks it's important. Now, whether you think it's important for us to look at this stuff depends on if you're convinced by the arguments that you've been given of why psychologists should be doing this work. Also, it depends on whether you think understanding the brain is critical to understanding human behavior. There are really fierce debates in psychology about this. Now, I'm not going to go into all of those debates, but be aware of them. Have a look for them. There's some people who say that actually, no, brain structure is not going to tell us anything about behavior. If anything, we actually need to understand behavior first, and behavior can then teach us about the brain. You know, understanding how people behave can help us understand how the brain structures itself. It's kind of that the brain is the symptom or the effect of the behavior, whereas others say no. The behavior is a result of or caused by brain structure. It's reflective of the basic architecture of the brain. So the brain isn't just a symptom of the behavior, it's the cause of the behavior. Now, let's not get into that, but be aware of those debates going on when you're looking at this material. So through all of the tests that are in the text, have a look through them. We're not going to go into detail on them in this podcast video, recorded lecture thing. The prescribed text does a really good job of describing the key features of each of the tests, the neurological tests, but I've put up a little summary for you on this slide. Excuse me. Remember, you can download the slides from Moodle. So if you don't get to read them in this video because your screen is too small or I talk too quickly and the slide's gone before you've properly read it, know that you can download the slides and look at it at your leisure. Now, this area of psychology is pretty seductive. Just want to show you a quick video of someone engaging with one of these neurological tests. This is the clock test, where the patient is asked to draw a clock face.
I want you to draw the face of a clock and set the hands for 11:10. Okay? You've got one there, but let's see if you can make it a little bit larger Put all the numbers on it and set the hands for 11:10.
Now, in videos like that, you see people struggle with this, and you become fascinated, or I do anyway, but a lot of us become fascinated. It's a puzzle, really. Why can't they do this thing? Is this thing that we can all do, but why can't this person do it? What's happening? It's kind of like the optical illusions again. We get fascinated by how our brains trick us into not being able to see something, or not see something that's actually there. So it's the same sort of fascination. What's going on? This is weird, and we kind of get interested to find out what is going on. Anyway, what do you think about neuropsychological testing? Is this something psychologists should be doing? I suppose one thing you might have learned so far is that psychology is used to working in an area where something cannot be known through direct observation, or something is yet to be discovered, so to speak. So psychology is used to working in areas where something's existence can only be inferred or imagined. Throughout this unit, really, you've been looking at that. Intelligence is just an inference. It's just an imagined concept. It's actually a statistical artifact. But we imagine it to be a thing, and then see if it's useful, imagining this thing to be a thing. And if it turns out to be useful, then we just say, well, it's a thing. Let's just pretend it's a thing. But it is pretense. It is imagination. These are things we can't see. So maybe this is the same. Brain research, we know so little about it. We can't possibly understand the brain at the moment. It's extraordinarily complex. Way more complicated than anything else science has ever tried to look at. So we just can't see it. And some people say, we will eventually be able to fix the problem. That's irrelevant. Right now, we don't understand. It's too complicated. So psychology is used to that, to dealing with stuff that no one can properly see, or understand. We don't know what's there. No problem for psychology. We just make it up, in a kind of nice way. We're not committing fraud. Well, some people say we are. But, we make stuff up and see if it's useful. And if it's useful, then let's go for it. So maybe that's why neuroscience is unproblematic, why psychology is jumping in so quickly and think we can do this. So, as I said, the brain is more complicated than we can possibly understand at the moment. But, psychology is having a go. What do you think? Do you think this is something we can do as an adjunct area to our discipline? Rather than, being the whole central focus of our discipline? Now, some psychologists are clearly attracted to this area because of the size of the problem. How many people's lives are being negatively impacted by brain injury. And, good for them. And that's a good reason to be doing this work. But you do wonder also whether there's an attraction to the profession as a whole in this area, which comes from it being an area that's associated with the esteem that comes from the medical profession. There's a lot of esteem that comes from brain research, brain surgeons. Wow. They're clever guys. If people can think that we're like brain surgeons, then everyone will think we're intelligent. This concept which we've helped to create. But there's a lot of esteem that gets attached, and particularly attached to biological medicine. A lot of funding goes into medicine. So maybe we do this work so that we like to be seen as clever people, that we like to be well resourced. We like to be paid well, or to have funds available to do our work. Maybe it's also because we love the challenge, and this is an extraordinarily challenging area to work in. Okay, so really what I'm asking you to do there is to have a think about that. Have a think through those issues, and I'm not going to tell you what to think. You've got to think for yourself, haven't you? So there's plenty of that material. There's plenty of stuff there really to kick around to start off a discussion in our class meeting. Our class meeting for this, I'm completely losing track of things. This is going to be class meeting number 10, isn't it? Yeah, so we can discuss some of these issues in class meeting 10. So I'll leave it there. So till next time, theme 6 is next time, our final theme. So till then, yeah, see you later. Oh, I'll tell you about, tell you about theme 6. It's all about psychological testing that's used in employment settings, in selecting, recruiting employees. That's pretty much the focus. And I've done a bit of work in that area. It's where I started my career in psychology, in that area. So it'll be nice for me to revisit it, and I hope it'll be a nice experience for you too. There you go. Okay, so till next time. Ta-da.